Abducted from Africa as a child and enslaved in South Carolina, Ometha thinks only of freedom and the knowledge she needs to get home. Sold to an indigo trader who recognizes her intelligence, Ometha is torn from her husband and her child and thrown into the chaos of the Revolutionary War. In Manhattan, New York, Ometha helps pen the Book of Negroes, a list of blacks rewarded for service to the king with safe passage to Nova Scotia. When the British abolitionists come looking for adventurers to create a new colony in Sierra Leone, Ometha assists in moving 1,200 Nova Scotians to Africa and aiding the abolitionists' cause by revealing the realities of slavery to the British public. This captivating story of a woman's remarkable experience spans 6 decades in 3 continents and brings to life a crucial chapter in world history. Join Kindred as we discuss Someone Knows My Name, aka The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome to a book discussion with Kindred. Joining me today is Beverly.
Hello.
Ometha.
Hello.
And Carlota.
Hi.
And I'm Devine Nelson, your host. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Today we're going to be discussing Someone Knows My Name by Lawrence Hill, aka The Book of Negroes. What do we know about this author?
Well, this is a new author for us. We have not read him before. He's the son of American immigrants, a black father and a white mother. And the day after they got married in 1953, they moved to Ontario, Canada, where he was raised in a predominantly white suburb. He has written several books. I think this is his 10th novel. This one is called, here it's called Someone Knows My Name. Mm-hmm. It's also called The Book of Negroes, and in France, it's called Ometha. Okay. So it's the same book, mm-hmm. but different names in different places. He was a writer. He has worked as a reporter for the Free Press and another agency in Toronto. Both his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather were Methodist Episcopal ministers. So he's grown up, you know, with that influence, but his work is greatly influenced by his parents' human rights involvement. And he's writing another book, another novel, and some children's stories. Mm-hmm. And that's what we know about him. He lives with his family in Hamilton, Ontario.
Okay. How about the book cover?
So when I, got assigned the book cover, I realized that in today's digital age, I never see book covers anymore because I just download the books onto my Kindle app and read them on my phone. So I was eager to see the cover, and when I saw the cover, I was like, because that's not how I would have pictured the cover of this book. And the reason is because this book starts with the voice of Ometha when she is an old woman and she's already lived this long, rich history and gone through all these amazing things. So I would have, more seen a book of an old woman, a wise old woman who's like seen so many things. And this book, this cover, I guess it could be when she's a child and she first arrives as an enslaved person after crossing the Atlantic on the Middle Passage in the Sea Islands of South Carolina, where she first, you know, served in bondage when she was a child. Because it kind of looks like the Sea Islands, and she's, you know, kind of standing there, but she's sort of standing there like, well, here I am, which is what I really loved about this book, is that it's really about her voice.
Yeah.
You know, so that part of it, I guess I could see, but still, it wouldn't have been the cover I would have picked.
Okay. What about the writing style?
Well, first the title. Let me talk about the title. The book of Negroes was written in 2007, and in Montreal and in Toronto, they accepted that title, but they felt that you're just out of touch with how people speak. When the people in America and in the United States, especially like in the Bronx or Boston, nobody wanted to read this book because of the title. So that's why he changed the title to Somebody Knows My Name, because that the connotation of Negro had a negative connotation. So, so the title of the book is apropos to what's happening in the book. As you already mentioned in the tease, it's about after the Revolutionary War, if you could have proved to the British that you helped the British during the American Revolutionary War, your name was put into the Book of Negroes. And, you know, that
gave you your freedom.
That gave you your freedom.
Yeah.
And this allowed you to go to Nova Scotia in Canada. So the book is very apropos to the story, both the Book of Negroes, because that is the official Book of Negroes, is a historical document. And it was called the Book of Negroes. So that is appropriate for a title for the book, as well as Somebody Knows My Name, because the people's names were put into this book.
And the writing style, what did we think of that?
Well, writing style is very easy. It was very long, and it wasn't a book that you can sit down and read in one day. You had to take pieces of it, because there were some very painful pieces. And you know, as we read any books about slavery and it's a very painful past that we are part of. So it read well. I think that he did his research, and as you said, Carlota, the voice of Aminata Diablo, who is our main protagonist in this book, was loud and clear.
Yes, very much
throughout the whole entire book, and everything that happened made sense.
Okay, well, why don't we take a moment just to kind of give a brief summary to bring our audience into the book that we're discussing. Now, Ometha, the book opens with a story about a very precocious 11-year-old living in Africa with her family, practicing the Muslim religion, but also beginning to deal with who am I as a woman, and do I want to be a traditional kind of woman in the village? She had a thirst for knowledge. She was always pestering her father around, teach me how to write. I want to learn more. Her mother was a baby catcher. Her mother was the midwife, and she went with her mother and, you know, to catch babies. And so she began to develop her identity. And through that process, unfortunately, she gets captured by the slave traders that actually look like her. And she's captured, and unfortunately, as her mother tries to protect her, her mother dies. Her mother's killed in the scuffle, and Ometha is not able to get back to her village, and she is taken by the slaveholders, and her journey begins.
Her father was killed during that incident.
Because he tried to defend the village. Yes, and that's where the 11-year-old Ometha begins her journey. That then evolves into this great adventure. What is your opinion? You know, the author talks about his intentional decision to begin the story through the eyes of an 11-year-old child. Why do you think he chose to tell it in the beginning from a youthful voice? Does her youth at the time of her abduction allow us to get a flavor of her emotional growth and the emotional intensity? Why the voice of a child?
I think youths have persistence, and they have courage, and they have stamina, and you needed that to get through this book. It was a very emotional, painful book for me. I got angry reading it, all the emotions you experience, and I think you need a kind of youthful energy to be able to sustain that. And coming from that perspective, you had what you needed to kind of walk you through her life path. So I think it was a good way to start. It started with the youthfulness because you needed that to get through the rest of it.
I know for me, in other books that I've read about slavery, the conversation is usually told through the voice of an adult. And for me, her youthful voice really gave me a different perspective on the views of slavery and kind of the slavery of the body and the slavery of the mind. Because I did not read her as a subservient slave, you know, and for me that was a welcome difference in kind of reading a story about slavery.
And the thing about her was she was always learning. She was always observant. She, you know, she wasn't passive. And even when she was on that slave ship, she picked up some of the different other dialects of the Africans that were on that ship so that she can communicate to
she
people.
did. The section of the section of the book was set in the Sea Islands of South Carolina, depicting the 18th century indigo plantation, where African American slaves and overseers are left largely on their own during what they call the sixth season. Which is kind of 6 months during the year. To what degree does this cultural and social isolation allow for an interesting development and interaction of African American character in the novel?
Well, not just in the novel, but also in real life. So I was also very impressed with the amount of research the author must have done to really get these pieces. She, you know, basically, again, the voice of this child and the woman as she goes across the lifespan is directly at the center of the novel. So it's like you're really seeing everything through her eyes. And it's like you're experiencing what she experiences as you read, you know, the story. And it's a very, I mean, I hate to say fresh perspective. It's a very fresh perspective.
It really is.
So they talk about, so yeah, you were talking earlier about, you know, in a lot of books about slavery or the period of enslavement, you know, it's just like one horrible thing after another, and it's really told from this sort of almost paternalistic view. And this was really about her experience. So she's on the Sea Islands. She's trying to figure out, like, how can I, you know, kind of negotiate these relationships, the work I have to do. She self-teaches her about the indigo, culling the indigo, you know, and turning it into dye. She self-teaches herself, so she gets put to do that. And doing those kinds of things, she manages to protect herself in many ways from some of the horrible things that are happening to people around her, you know, like sexual violation and things like that. And she has lost her mother, she's lost her father, but she begins to create new family members in the people who are around her, you know, and so she attaches herself to them, to the woman Georgia, you know, who becomes kind of a surrogate mother to her, you know, and she just sort of, I mean, she's just like this amazing, you know, she plants herself in this really adverse situation, and yet she grows and flourishes. It's like how you think of a weed in a sidewalk, you know, but she just grows and flourishes and grows and flourishes and really develops. So, and I thought the way that the author talked about the Sea Islands and life there was really, really very realistic. Yeah.
Well, Well, you know, and it was the 6th season, and she allowed herself to be sick. But ladies, it's that time in the program where we need to take a break for a public service announcement. Please come back and join Kindred as we continue to discuss Someone Knows My Name by Lawrence Hill. Welcome back to a book discussion with Kindred, Someone Knows My Name. We were talking about Ometha's experience, and one of the things that we know happened in the book was that she was subjected to some pretty cruel situations, but she had a rather non-traditional relationship with her masters. It wasn't always as it seemed. It was pretty complex. How does the story reveal the complex ways that people react to unnatural, unequal relationships? Because Ometha was supposed to be the slave and the master, but that didn't always reflect what the relationship looked like.
I think part of it is because she was smart, and they recognized her being, you know, slaves were considered less than human, and here you had one who was very smart, who knew things, who could get things done. And when people need you, and this is in the world in general, when people need you and you have something that they want from you, the relationship tends to be different. They tend to treat you better because there's that need. And they don't need you, they treat you like scum, but they needed her for so many things, to get to the other slaves, to get people to do stuff. They realized she had many talents, and when that happens, the relationship changes, because it's not an equal relationship, but I need you, so I have to be nice to you.
Exactly.
And that, I think, is what really propelled her through and kept her alive for a long time, because they needed her in so many ways.
And she was not just needed in the villages and the communities, she was also needed to catch babies for the white folk, because the white women said, we don't want the crazy doctor catching our babies.
Right,
so
right.
she really had a niche, and she made that work for herself.
And also,
And her master made her pay him pay a certain amount of her money that she got from midwifery to him.
Exactly. But he let her keep a portion of the money which is very unusual for the slave master, the slave and the slave master relationship.
But then now this was in the second home that she was in, because the first one
he was just a bully.
Awful.
Yeah, that's the one that the Jewish
Right.
guy actually helped her get
Although
away.
he did something bad as well.
Well, he sold her baby.
Right.
He brokered the sale of her child.
But that was the condition. You know, it was a forced choice for him, though, because that was the condition under which the slave, the master who was abusive to her, would sell her to him. That had to be part of the package. And I think that he had a lot of guilt about having to do that. But it was like, this is the only way I can save you.
Her. And the guilt manifests itself later on.
Yes, it
when
did.
the old master tries to say, okay, she's my slave, and the guy says, oh no, you sold her to me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, and he purposely brought her to New York so that she can get free.
Yes. Because with him being a Jewish man, he was dealing with his own segregation and discrimination. You know, during the course of the story, Ometha gets married and has a child and has a family. And throughout her journey, they separate back and forth. But she always remains true to him. What does that tell us about the nature of love and loyalty?
Well, the man that she had the baby from traveled with her. First of all, he was part of her capture. Yeah.
It wasn't just they had a baby
together.
together.
They were married in the African way.
They jumped
the broom.
Right.
And
it's the only way they could get married. I mean.
And he was
but
also
I mean, marriage is marriage, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And he was also had traveled with her through the Middle Passage, so she knew him because he was part of the black person that had them all cockled. Unfortunately. So she had established this relationship with this man, and I said, wow, through all of these years, the only man that she had sex with was the master who raped her, and him. And she was able to have that first child, and then she had the second child.
Yes.
And so throughout the whole story, she did not look at any other man any other way because she was always faithful to her husband. Even after her husband, when they was supposed to be going to Nova Scotia, and the ship sunk, and her husband was dead, and she didn't know that for a while. She never had any other man in her life.
But he also was true to her.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people were confused about that.
Right.
Because as she began to interact with the African American slaves that were actually born into slavery, they had a very different perspective on the love and the loyalty. It was like, girl, that man is gone. Get yourself a new man. And she said, I have a husband and I am married. I don't need no new man.
And she specifically said, I have a husband and I am married.
And I'm married. And she stayed true to that. And that for me was one of those dynamics of that African history and that, commitment and values from her village. Because once you took a husband, he was always your husband.
Life or death.
Life or death. And the slave born in America was like, I'll love who I love when I can love, and taking on
because you never
whatever
knew.
Man,
they never knew if that man was going to be at the same plantation or whatever, or be sold someplace else and never seen again.
But the other devastating emotional trauma for her was when her second daughter was basically stolen from her
and sold back into slavery
by the family, the white family, who, as the unrest continued in Sierra Leone. And she could no longer take care and keep her child safe. She trusted the master and his wife.
But they were still in the States
and
at that time.
They stole her,
and
put her on the boat. Okay, but believe it or not, ladies, we're coming to that part in the show where we need to decide if it's a book up or not. And I know for me, it was a major book up. It was a good, stimulating, educating read. It was a non-traditional story, because when I picked up this book and it said slavery, I said, I don't want to read another book about slavery. But it was just very refreshing. Very, very informed and very empowering. Her voice was so empowering to me, and her level of integrity was just impeccable. It took me from the 1700s to 2019, where women are having their voice and having their say. And reclaiming. So I definitely give it a book up. Beverly?
This book, I liked that it seemed so historical. The book almost read like an actual autobiography of a real person. It was slow reading, and because you had to, like, you read and then you had to feel it and try to let it go to get on to the next page. I think that this book should be a book that should be on the reading list for high school English students, and also for college level students as well, read by both white and black people. Or any people. Everybody.
Ometha?
Well, I loved it. Any book that makes me feel, and as I said, I went through the whole range of emotions, anger, happiness, sadness, the whole works. So I definitely give it a book up. It was a great read.
Well, I'm going to give it 4 books up, so that means it will have 8 books up. So it'll have double the books up. This is like one of the best books I've ever read, and just it's what it's what everyone has said. The way it tells this story, and it's a story we've heard before and seen so many times on TV and whatever, but the way it's told from her perspective that really puts her at the center. And you know, when you said it's almost empowering, I mean, to say that a book about enslavement could actually feel empowering. But you're right, it really is. I mean, it's just a great book, and the author did an amazing job of bringing these details to life with such historical accuracy. And everybody should read it.
Definitely would recommend it. Definitely would recommend it.
Touched so many other issues.
So many things.
But I think that we have kind of discussed enough to encourage people to pick up the book and say, I want to be a part of this journey. I want to better understand.
I want to know her name.
I want to know her name. And with that, ladies, we've had another successful book discussion with Kindred, and Kindred wishes you good health and good reading until next time.
Turn off your lights for Earth Hour. For our forests, our rivers, our oceans, our wildlife, and for our climate. For our Earth. Earth Hour, March 30th, 2019.